welcome into another edition of the Talkin Solutions with the Chesh podcast. In this episode, we're going to talk a little bit about consumers, and we have the founder of The Circular Consumer with us today, Anisa Maruschak. Anisa, how are you doing today?
I'm doing very well. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on. Excited to have this episode and really kind of dig deep into a little bit about what you do. So for all the listeners out there to kind of get us rolling, can you please tell us a little bit about what the Circular Consumer encompasses?
Yeah, so the Circular Consumer is an online community that I've created to promote and empower conscious consumerism and to inspire sustainable living. So we talk about topics that involve educating on the circular economy and the importance of that. And we talk about how to live sustainable, incorporate sustainable habits into your lifestyle so that we can all lower our impact on the environment. And
That's awesome.
That's about it.
Yeah, that's great. Tell us a little bit about the background, about why you felt the need to come out and do this, because I know you have experience of kind of seeing firsthand knowledge about the impacts of consumerism, especially the way we have typically consumed in North American society. So tell us a little bit about your experience and why you decided to go through with this.
Yeah, so my background is in chemistry, and out of university, I started working in water treatment development, so developing technology to treat industrial wastewater. And this industrial wastewater was coming from different sources, such as resource extraction, all the way through to landfill leachate. And then when I left that job after a few years, I went to Indonesia and I worked as a sustainability advisor there. And while I was there, I spent a day working in an eco center with some youth. And they had taken me down into one of their classrooms, and aligning the walls were different plastics that had been shipped there from developed countries all around the world, including the US, Canada, many countries in Europe. So it was very shocking to see like common household brands, to see that packaging in Indonesia. And when back home, we have infrastructure to deal with plastics and our recyclables. So it really brought to light, I guess, maybe the issues that exist within our waste management systems here in Canada. So yeah, from there, I sort of got the full picture about the impacts of consumerism. And when I had asked the director of the Eco Center, like, how can I help? They said, please just go back and like create awareness and let people know the impacts of consumerism. So that experience mixed with my previous experience of seeing the environmental and social impacts of resource extraction all the way through to waste management, effectively the entire life cycle effect of consumerism was, it left a big impression for sure.
Yeah. There's a couple things that really kind of intrigued me there, and I definitely want to get to asking you about how people can change their habits and what people can do. But one thing that really kind of stands out to me that I think is one of the biggest issues that kind of faces the awareness around that is the fact that we don't really see it, in North America. Like, you're from Canada, I'm from the US. At least in America and in Canada, like, it's not really front and center, like you had just mentioned, in Indonesia or anything like that. Those are the countries and the people that are kind of suffering from our consumer habits, which obviously is, when you think about it like that, wow, that's really not fair. Like, that seems a little ridiculous. So do you think that that's kind of the biggest issue? It's just to the problem that is just the fact that it's just out of sight, out of mind type thing?
Absolutely. So here in Canada and the US, we have these recycle programs in place. And, the consumer puts their recyclables in the bin and it goes away. And we don't really think about it beyond that point. Same with our waste or our trash. We don't think about the next step in that life cycle, the resources that are required, first of all, to process like recycled products or materials, as well as the environmental impacts of our waste even going to a landfill. So definitely, I think there is a lack of awareness on what happens after it leaves, our home. And I think and I mean, even for myself, before I had traveled to Indonesia, I also didn't know what happened after I put my trash in the garbage or my recyclables in the bin. So
Yeah, and it's one of those things where I think people might recognize it, read about it, and go, wow, that's awful. I need to do better. But then it just goes away over a little bit of time. I don't know what it is with human nature and the way we think and the way our brains operate, but I just feel like, I might watch a documentary or something and I go, oh, that's awful. I need to change the habits. And then maybe I do so for a few days, but then it kind of gets out of sight, out of mind again, where I'm not kind of seeing it and everything like that as well. So I think what you're doing to create this awareness, and clearly they think the same as well when you ask, hey, what can I do? And they say, hey, it's just awareness. So do you see that kind of growing though? I mean, I feel like I see people like you more often and other people trying to create that education from a global perspective about what our habits and how they impact other places, whether it be negatively or positively. Do you think that it's increasing the exposure?
absolutely. There are many people out there like me spreading, or creating awareness and getting people involved, especially through social media. We're able to reach wide audiences. But I think too, even, you know, governments are realizing sort of the world is waking up to our waste issue, specifically plastics. Plastics have been in the news a lot in the last few years, with microplastics showing up in our food chain. They're like in glaciers. Literally, microplastics can now be found everywhere. So I think there is more awareness around the issue, and people are starting to think more about how they can live sustainably or how they can minimize their impact. But I think from my point of view, it's very important that we not look at how do we manage the waste, but rather how do we prevent the waste. So looking upstream in our buying habits, and trying to look at ways that we can minimize excess waste through like packaging or even just buying less in general.
Spot on, I think there, and definitely want to get going to that. Plastic, for example, I have grown to really despise plastic, to be honest, because it's from an environmental level, it's terrible. There are a lot of studies going on about plastic's effects on your genes and your cells and things of that nature as well, especially with men and stuff like that, which is really kind of like, okay, that's bad, right? And so the only thing that plastic's got going for it is its convenience, which is unfortunately very powerful. So I'm definitely on that train to kind of get away from the plastics, but I want to roll into the solutions aspect of it as well. Anisa, I want you to share your education with us, share your education so that people listening can be more educated consumers, consume less. You also went on a financial journey a little bit with a version of minimalism. You'll have to elaborate a little more on that, but paying down debt, which also I think is really interesting, just to combine your consumerism with your financial habits. It's just a win-win there. But I want you to elaborate a little bit more on what are some things that the consumer does right now that they can improve on or fix in their kind of everyday spending habits that will help the environment and ultimately, like you said, help them consume less and also save more money.
Yeah, so plastics came about because of their convenience and they're very economical. it actually doesn't cost a lot to produce plastic, which is another very big barrier in removing it. But yeah, my journey actually started when I was on another mission to pay down my student loan and my car loan debt. And I was on this journey to financial independence. And by tracking my spending through creating a budget, I was able to see exactly where I was spending and what I was buying. And from there, I was able to optimize my expenses and also define what I really needed in my life and what I didn't need. So I was sort of seeing like what excess I was bringing into my home without even realizing it. So I think a very good place to start is to define what is enough. What do you need in order to create the lifestyle that you want? And through sort of doing that exercise, you can determine what holds value. So then when you go shopping, you tend to be a little bit more intentional with your purchases, because everything that you're buying is going to directly benefit the lifestyle that you want.
Yeah, and I love what you said kind of about looking at your finances and kind of seeing, your budget or expenses, things of that nature as well, because I think that is tangible. I mentioned earlier about how, out of sight, out of mind with the waste and the excess and the garbage and the plastics and all those types of bad things that other countries, but your finances are a funny thing for a lot of people, right? It's kind of like blind eye. I'm not really going to look at what I'm expending or anything because you're kind of nervous. You don't really want to see it. And once you see it, I feel like you're much more inclined to take action by it. So I think that's a great way to kind of approach that as well. But one thing I think that people probably struggle with is that they may want to consume less, but it's almost, I don't want to call it an addiction because it's not an addiction, but when you have a 24/7 advertising cycle and you have society that kind of pushes these new products out all the time with their businesses and that you need to look cool or status and things like that as well. So what do you think people can do to kind of change that type of mindset where it's not so much like, oh, I need this fancy thing? Because I think that's what drives a lot of consumer habits. So curious to kind of get your opinion on that, because I agree with what you say completely. Everything is about value, right? Like, are some of these things really valuable or are they not? Or do you just want it to have it type thing? So what do you think that people can kind of work on to kind of have that self-reflection?
That is a very good question. And I think, unfortunately, it's something that you have to define and determine within yourself. For me, I was very motivated to save money. And also, I'm very motivated to live the life that I choose. So by not having debt, I'm able to live a more flexible lifestyle. I can choose what type of work I want. Again, it's just it's really looking at what type of lifestyle do I want and what habits do I need to create and incorporate in order to achieve that lifestyle.
Right. One of the things you do, which I think helps people with that, because I think everybody kind of wants to consume less or consume with a company that's a little bit more sustainable or environmental friendly with their practices, whether it's the creation of their products, production of their products, whatever that might be. And mistake me if I'm wrong, but one of the things that you like to do is kind of match consumers with sustainable friendly brands and things of that nature as well. So what made you think that would be kind of a good idea? And what are some of the processes you go through to kind of find those sustainable brands and then connect them with consumers and people that you kind of work with?
Yeah, so greenwashing is a very big problem. And for those who don't know what greenwashing is, it's basically when companies are claiming to be environmentally friendly or low impact, but they're really not. So typically you'll see often used on labels with like eco-friendly or green, or the labels will be colored green. Even the products are sometimes colored green to give this impression that, the product is environmentally friendly. So part of my mission is to bring sustainable products to the everyday consumer, and I do that by researching brands and companies that are actually going above and beyond in sustainability. So these are brands that are sourcing local raw materials, or they're supporting local companies. Manufacturing is done in a sustainable and ethical way, whether it be here or abroad. Also, like supporting brands or promoting brands that are taking disposal into consideration with their products. They sort of take like a holistic approach to the production of their products throughout the entire life cycle. So I sort of do all the research for the consumer so that they don't have to, because it takes a lot of time.
Yeah, I would imagine, especially based off of the comment and definition you made about greenwashing. I mean, you kind of got to sift through all kind of the BS that they might have and figure out, okay, is this company just a greenwasher again? Are they just saying it because they want to look good? Or are they actually putting tangible, products and action into their words and doing so? So I imagine that is quite time consuming as well. So when you find these brands and you kind of are able to chat with people that follow you and things of that nature as you spread the awareness as well, how do your consumers or the people that follow you and the feedback you kind of get? Tell us a little bit about, the feedback. I imagine it's pretty positive, when they have someone that's able to get them to be able to buy these sustainable products.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the online community is very appreciative of all of that research that goes into finding these brands. I think too, it helps them to sort of take the first step in, creating these new sustainable habits. And then from the brand's perspective, I think too, it's beneficial for them because they're reaching a very niche community, an intentional community that wants to incorporate these habits and to reduce their impact.
Yeah, and with that as well, what types of things, I guess what I'm asking is, how do you spread the message, right? Like, because you match these brands up and then you have the community. So what types of things can people kind of get from you in order to learn more about this? Will they schedule kind of coaching? I know that you have like products like a newsletter and things like that to kind of get the tips in the community down, or their guides or things like that. Like, what are the best ways that people can kind of access your resources to learn a little bit more about these sustainable habits and these sustainable brands?
Yeah, so we have a blog, and on there, there's under different categories, all the content is categorized, and we do feature sustainable brands and sort of tell their story, which I think is very powerful, because being able to tell a brand's story sort of sets them apart, and then people can easily access that, like the products that they sell. So if you're a consumer looking for sustainable products or to learn more, you can definitely check out the blog. There's also our Instagram, which is filled with tips and knowledge all around like the circular economy as well as sustainability. There's also the newsletter, as you mentioned, which people can sign up on the website. We have an ebook that's coming out later this month, the beginning of next month, which is all focused around how to save money and live sustainably. So sort of taking my experience and providing all of the tips and sort of a roadmap to how to get started on that journey if people are interested in it.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are interested in saving more money and being more consumer habit friendly. That's for sure. Let's talk a little bit about the financial side of it as well, because I know, like you mentioned, that was the initial drive. That was it. Like, with the college debt and car loan debt as well. What do you think is the best first step? I know you mentioned a budget, so maybe that might be it. But what do you think is the best first step a consumer can do to kind of take a look at their finances and start to get them a little bit under control?
So the best first step is like changing your mindset and wanting to actually change your financial situation. Because a budget and, finance tracker is only as good as the amount of effort that you're going to put into it. So for me, literally the first question was, where's all my money going? I was working full time, I was paying my bills, but I sort of just at the end of the day felt like my money was leaking out somewhere. I didn't know where. So that's when I decided to create a budget, which is just very simply put, looking at what your income is and what your expenses are, your fixed and your variable expenses. And then I added another layer of financial tracking, which again, like I said, it painted a very clear picture of where my money was going, what I was spending it on. And the expense tracking is very powerful because it personalizes your budget and it really allows you to take accountability and ownership of your financial situation. So I would say mindset and then budget and expense tracking are the two most important ways to get started.
I think mindset. Yeah, I think for me, mindset is key for everything, right? You have to be motivated, or I don't know if motivated is the right word, but you have to make it developed into a habit, right? Ambition or something a little more permanent than motivation. So I think that's great to kind of reflect on the expenses. Now, one question I think some people might be wondering, and I have this question as well, is, sometimes the association of sustainability, the association of eco-friendly also comes with an increased cost. All right. That's kind of an association some people have, whether it's true or not, who knows? But for organic food, for example, or healthy eating, one of the big arguments people have is, oh, well, healthy eating is too expensive. You can't do that, blah, 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 things of that nature as well. So when it comes to, in your experience with these brands that you've researched and their products, is there an increased cost that kind of comes a part of that as well? Or do you see it kind of on par, or where do you kind of see that? Or is it kind of a variable?
I think that there's definitely an increased cost for the products. And in my opinion, there should be an increased cost because it costs more to source sustainable raw materials. It costs more for certifications. It costs more to pay fair wages and to take care of your workers and to have them working in safe establishments. There is that opinion that sustainable products do cost more, but when you pair that with sort of looking at your expenses and defining what you really need in life and defining what you need versus what you want, you're able to save money, which then you can use to invest in these sustainable products. I think when we are transitioning into a more sustainable lifestyle, we should be looking at our products being an investment and not just something that we're consuming and throwing away. And I think, like I said, the money that you'll save by buying less can actually then balance out that increased cost.
Yeah, and I think this is where, I love your name, kind of the circular consumer, right? Because it all circulates, it all kind of relates to everything. Like you mentioned, the fair wages, health benefits as well. Like if you're talking organic sourced food versus, food with a bunch of, bad things in it, chemicals and things of that nature as well. All these types of things should be looked at as an investment in value, right? Because you may not be getting money back necessarily in your investment from a traditional sense, but you might be getting the health benefits of the investment, or you might be getting the investment of the time that is going to create more sustainability and better lives for other people across the board, and long term. I mean, look at what we're doing to countries. Southeast Asia has some of those problems. Some of the countries, I believe, in parts of Africa have a couple of the issues as well. The trash, the waste, like all that types of things is hurting those people, which when you think about it, well, might need to spend a bunch of money on it later. So, you have to look at it in an investment. So I really like that kind of mindset that you had kind of with that circular consumer. So, actually, I'm kind of curious, where did you come up with the name, the circular consumer?
Yeah, so the circular consumer actually came about because I wanted to educate everyone or create awareness around the circular economy and sort of highlight the benefits of the circular economy, because there's zero waste, which is also very popular. But zero waste is sort of one part of the circular economy. And so I wanted to, take a more holistic approach and educate on that. And then as I started writing blog posts and, just sort of finding my groove with the business, I realized, well, actually, circular consumer encompasses so much more. There's like the sustainability side and, redesigning our economy to generate less waste. But there's also this part that where when we become aware of our financial situation and what we're buying, we can then take that money that we save and reinvest it in like social programs, our community development, sustainable businesses. So it's kind of looking at like return on investment and sort of redefining return on investment, like you touched on earlier. We're so used to looking at things from a financial perspective, but we really need to be looking and considering what other benefits are coming from these actions. Like you mentioned about the in bettering our health, which means that we'll save money like down the road. But I don't know if it's just human nature, but we tend to look more like short term and look for those short term wins versus those long term wins. So we need to, be more aware of like the long term gains, I guess.
Yeah, I think people definitely need to focus. It's very hard to imagine yourself in the future sometimes, like especially when you're talking decades in the future, it can be difficult. And I think that leads to a large part people when saving for retirement, at least in America, people struggle with saving for retirement. And I think a large part is because it's hard to envision yourself in the future versus, right now I need this, I need that. I think the best part about it is just goes back to that mindset comment you made. I think that we can make as consumers more focused our mindset on creating value for ourselves and the people around us. And then if that happens, it'll just kind of continue to snowball and it'll really, create much better lives for everyone, because there's no reason why, if you take a budget and you get your finances in order, there's no reason why you can't invest a little more money in things that are more sustainable, that are better for your health. There's no reason why you can't invest in traditional ROI and in stock investments or whatever, and then use that money that you make to then invest more in kind of sustainable stuff. So it's just that circular consumer lifestyle that I think can really lead to great tangible results. Anisa, I kind of want to ask you a couple questions about, the business. How is that kind of going? How have you seen it evolve from the start, and what kinds of things maybe have surprised you, have, in a good or a bad way, and what are some challenges you face?
Yeah, so initially it was started to just create awareness. And from there, it's evolved into something that I'm still trying to figure out because it is fairly new. It's only been up for 6 months now. But I've incorporated consulting, so working with brands on their marketing, as well as how they can, working with them to develop sustainable processes within their business to lower their impacts, and then figuring out ways of how we can measure that impact and like quantify it, so then we can bring that back to the consumer to say, like, this is actually the impact that we're having versus the traditional route. So that's really exciting. There's consulting, and plus I love working with brands. I love telling their story. I love spreading this like good news, and really innovative ideas, I think, is also, that gets me really excited. And then working more with the community, like I mentioned, I have the ebook that's coming out, and then hopefully from there we will be developing courses, which dive a little bit more into helping people sort out their finances and start living sustainably.
Love it. When you approach those brands and you have conversations with those brands, is it a lot of you kind of outreaching? Are they coming to you? And take us a little bit of behind the scenes, how those conversations go, because I think with some brands, you always kind of hear, oh, corporate, culture might kind of eat you alive type stuff. But, there are a lot of companies out there that see the problem and they are attempting to add value with that through consultancy, like somebody like yourself, or even departments for bigger companies as well. So take us a little bit behind the scenes, what it's like working with these brands, telling their story, and the way that you link to these brands and work with them, and how you get them as clients.
Yeah, so it's a balance between me reaching out to brands and also them finding me. Typically, I work with smaller businesses. I don't have any corporate clients at this point, maybe somewhere down the future. But I think for me, I really value small business and the local economy, because when you have a very strong local economy, you build resiliency within the community. So I think that's really important and super powerful to focus on. But yeah, it's a little bit of both, me reaching out and them finding me.
That's the power of social media, right? You show up on search results, or maybe a social media post goes viral a little bit and somebody finds you, and you work with some cool local businesses or small businesses across. I imagine you work with kind of global companies and businesses. Or is it primarily in Canada?
A little bit of both, primarily in North America at this point. I mean, we're just starting, so we haven't expanded too far yet, but we'll get there.
Yeah. I guess global and international, that word doesn't really fit so much when it's Canada and America, right? We're so close, the neighbors to the north, neighbors to the south, and whatnot. That's awesome.
Valid point. I said valid point.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, especially you and I. I'm located in Seattle. You're up in British Columbia. A lot of people don't know. For people that don't know, that's a hop, skip, and a jump. That's 3 hours away. It's about the same distance to Canada than to Oregon. Anisa, what other types of things kind of would you like to add about your platform, and just to create awareness and things of that nature about the issue of our current version of consumerism?
Ooh, that's a good one. I think that, like I mentioned earlier, we just really need to become more intentional with our consumption habits, because everything that we consume or use or make, dispose of, it really all comes from the earth. Like, we depend on the earth for our prosperity. And so far, we've been operating in this linear economy, which is extremely wasteful. So as countries start to incorporate the circular economy in industry, where we're recycling materials, that will overall lower our impact on the environment and ensure prosperity for the future. So I think it's really about becoming intentional with our buying habits through maybe buying package free if you have available or access to that, buying less, investing in sustainable businesses, or supporting local sustainable businesses. So there's lots of ways to incorporate it. It's or even just changing your mindset, taking transit to work instead of driving your car, carpooling, walking to the store. There's so many ways to incorporate sustainability or to lower your impact on the environment. And I think that's sort of, the key thing that we need to address. So you can definitely check out the Instagram page. There's so many options or suggestions, tips on how to incorporate those habits.
Fantastic. Yeah. I mean, I can even think cities to a limit as well. Like, for example, I was living in Mexico City for a little while. Parts of Mexico City, they don't even offer plastic bags at the store, right? You got to just go in and bring your own reusable bag, which at first it was kind of annoying, right? Because I was so used to going and having a bag. But now, even as I came back to the States and stuff, I'm like, man, I'd rather just have that same bag. It's nice and easy. I hate the plastic bags. They're small. They're not sturdy. They're not strong. It's one of those small little things that you can make a change for that you may not think is making a big impact, but as a whole, as a community, if we can continue to do it, it'll have a big change.
Absolutely. And that's where we need government to really step in and create and implement policies around plastic usage. Here in Canada, we've banned single-use plastics. So we're phasing out, straws, plastic cutlery, any single-use plastic items, which is great. It's great to have a policy, but we also need it to be enforced, and industry needs to make sure that they're playing their part in that as well. And then as the consumer, we can also choose to refuse any single-use plastic items by purchasing reusables.
That's where the education comes into play, because, people like you and the circular consumer and things of that nature, because I do think when people actually understand the big issue with it and they go, oh, wow, yeah, that doesn't make a lot of sense. I don't really like that anymore. I'm not going to do that. I think that's where you get a lot of powerful stuff. And even if it costs maybe a little bit more in the short term, but in the long term, it might have those benefits going forward as well. So, yeah, I'm a huge fan of the platform. I love the education that you're providing, Anisa. And how can people follow you? How can they be part of the circular consumer community? And how can they get involved a little bit?
Yeah, so check us out on Instagram at the Circular Consumer, the.circular.consumer. We'll put the link in the notes. Check us out on our website, thecircularconsumer.com. There's a newsletter that you can sign up for to get weekly updates on what's going on. We offer guest posting, so anybody who has an interesting story or product that they want to put out there, we invite people to participate that way. There's lots of ways. I mean, we have a Facebook page as well.
Facebook pages, you kind of just need to have one these days, don't you? Even though it's just,
Yeah.
Awesome. Anisa, thank you so much. Anything else that you'd like to add before I let you go here?
No, if anybody has any questions, please reach out on any of our platforms. I'd love to connect and chat.
Awesome. Anisa, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and talking about your solution and providing awareness around some of these issues and also your plans with the newsletter, the tips, the Instagram, the tips, and then your plans for the ebook coming out, and then courses in the future where people can really, number one, save money, number two, be a more responsible consumer as well from a sustainable standpoint. So thanks so much for chatting with me today.
Thank you.
That is Anisa Maruschak joining us on the Talkin Solutions with the Chesh podcast. She is the owner of the Circular Consumer. You can find out more information at thecircularconsumer.com. As she mentioned, you can also follow on Instagram at the.circular.consumer. Lots of great tips on there for you as for your lifestyle, sustainable habits, also to budget and financially as well. So fantastic stuff there. And that's going to wrap up this episode of the Talkin Solutions with the Chesh podcast. As always, we'll have a bunch of information on the Circular Consumer throughout the week on our Instagram page at Talkin Solutions Podcast. So I encourage you to go check that out as well. But that'll conclude this episode. Until next time, hope you all have a great rest of your week.